Peter, I hope you don't get mad at me, but for most of my life, I've really been interested in whether God exists or not. And I have read and been exposed to and have the pleasure of speaking to many people who are scientists who have, if not proofs, demonstrations, inferences, the best explanation that they feel very deeply about that come to a belief in God. Mm. Do you see many fallacies that people use in order to prove or demonstrate the existence of God?
Well, they must all be fallacious because there is no God. It's whether you can detect the fallacy easily enough. I mean, I suppose a scientist would think of a first cause as a very powerful argument for the existence of God. Where did it all come from? Who started it off? And if this Big Bang was not the primordial Big Bang, was there a Big Bang much further back in time that he did set off, and so on? A terribly difficult question. But I think that any question that is given the answer, well, God must have done it, is an abnegation of the intellect. It really is, it sounds as though it's a positive statement, but in fact it's a camouflage of ignorance. And so it means that people have stopped thinking. And if you are confronted with the question of a first cause, where the universe comes from, don't just slip onto the feather bed of saying God did it, because that's meaningless, totally, utterly meaningless. What scientists have got to do is to trace causes back to their origin and find a mathematical theory of the emergence of the universe. I hope that that will prove possible. There is no evidence yet that it will not prove possible. And any scientist who says that it is impossible to account for the emergence of the universe from nothing without intervention is not being a real scientist, is just too pessimistic. And they don't know. I mean, they've got thousands of scientists beavering away with cosmology, trying to get back to that last moment. It'd be wonderful when they get there.
If we look back historically, we certainly see science moving ever forward and religion, in terms of the explanatory areas that they deal with, retreating.
Yeah.
And perhaps religion is in some corner now, but they're staking out a very strong position. But let's look at the historical flow. And we have what is called God of the gaps, that
yes.
Every time something is not understood.
Yeah, it's abnegation of the intellect.
But, and we've seen it occur
yes.
in many different stages.
Yeah, every time it occurs, it's abnegation of the intellect. So take that God of the gap, take it out of your sentence and say abnegation of the intellect. That's what it is. It's people giving up trying to think and using a kind of a spell. So that's all it is. I mean, it's just a spell. You've got to get from point A to point B in an argument. You've got a gap, so you weave a spell. You cast a spell, and you're there. and you call it God. You don't call it a spell.
And in the past, this has been true in a lot of the biological issues that have occurred. Certainly,
yes.
the emergence of different species.
Yes.
We know that with Darwin.
Yes.
That prior to Darwin, there was the God who
yes.
filled in those gaps.
The fabricator God, as it were.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I just used God without the descriptive adjective.
Yes. Quite so. But I don't see any part of the natural world, the physical world, let's call it, let's circumscribe it for the moment. And you might come back and say, well, what about the spiritual world and so on. But I don't see any aspect of the physical world.
Fair enough.
That requires the invocation of the spell we call God.
And religion has in fact been withdrawing that
yes.
from different areas because they have to deal with evolution. Certainly the broad majority of scientists or people who are reasonably intelligent accept evolution,
Yeah.
even those who believe in God.
Yeah.
There's some fringe elements perhaps that
Yeah.
don't, but that's...
Yeah.
So that's been withdrawn, but now they've put up their fortress in a new area.
Yes.
And so we have this progressive approach, and the new areas that are the defensive positions are the first cause that you mentioned.
Yes.
They are the nature of consciousness.
Yes.
There are very specific kinds
Yes.
of things now.
And the nature of good and evil, and
Yes.
things like that.
Right.
As it were, the moral law of the world. But I think even the moral law of the world can be understood in psychological, evolutionary, physical terms, as it were. I mean, we're all thinking beings, and that's the point. And we think our way through problems, and we think our through actions. At least we sometimes retrospectively think our way through actions and wish we hadn't done it, but and so on. But we can see that some things are appropriate and other things not. There are evolutionary pressures on us to behave in a particular way. There are psychological pressures on us, things like that. And science mustn't just throw up its hands and say, we can't deal with that area of existence. Proceed cautiously, understand, try to understand our psychological evolutionary roots, and that will lead to deep understanding of human nature.
Why do these issues provoke such emotion?
People are terrified, aren't they? They don't want to be laid out on a slab and dissected and analysed. But I don't think, although I'm very optimistic as a scientist, I don't think people should have fear about what is being discovered. I mean, maybe people should be terrified of the thought that there is no afterlife, but they should come to terms with it and enjoy the pre-afterlife rather than waiting for the non-existent afterlife. They should respect. But I think the driving force of morality in me is to not thwart the aspirations of others. That seems to be a pretty good way of going through life.
But that sense of morality is not something that's...
It's not beamed in.
Yeah.
No.
It's not endemic. It's not a fundamental principle of how the world works.
No, not a fundamental principle. It's an emergent problem, an emergent aspect of the human brain. Brains living in societies and getting on with neighbours.
So as we look at people who put forth arguments for God, what is the appropriate response?
Go to a psychiatrist, I think. Really, I think it's deeply interesting that you've got these very clever people, scientists, some of them eminent scientists, who even in this day and age still believe in God. I mean, you're talking to a number of them. And it's quite extraordinary to me that that scientists, with the current level of understanding of the power of explanation and understanding and comprehension that science provides, that there are still people out there who think that there must be this sort of supernatural thing going on. I think they have to go to psychiatrists, really. It must be their upbringing which has given them some deep insecurity.
If you talk to them, you really see a great diversity in the kind of thing that they're talking about. Maybe everyone will use something like the word God, but if you scratch that surface, what that God is can be vastly different.
Yeah.
But still, it is an expression of something beyond the physical.
Yes. It's
something built into the structure of stuff.
Yes. It's something incomprehensible.
Yeah, right.
In a way. Maybe it's comprehensible once you're dead, but in my view, that's a bit late. But it's this incomprehensibility of the supernatural, overarching overlord, really, that I find extraordinarily difficult to come to terms with. And especially as I see not one iota of evidence in favour of it, except sentiment.